Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum and welcome into the first lecture of the course, that is Islamic Banking and Finance. And my name is Muhammad Azhar Khan and my specialization is about finance and particularly Islamic finance. I have my PhD in finance and my subject was Islamic financial system into it, and I did my research in different topics of Islamic finance. And in this lecture we are going to have an overview of what we are going to study in this course. So before going into details of different subjects, let me introduce a bird view of all the lectures that we will have in this course. So first of all, the first topic of our this course would be the characteristics of Islamic financial system, and this lecture is actually based on the verses of Quran and hadith of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and these characteristics are derived, as I mentioned earlier, out of Quranic verses and from hadith of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these are about 10 points we have mentioned here, but maybe if the scholars they want to search more, they may find more. But these are the points we will discuss in this lecture, in the first lecture. And do keep in mind that I don't want you to write the verses and hadith in the exam. You may skip that, but these are the principles, these are the characteristics based upon we will derive certain principles of Islamic financial system. But let me read it for you. Allah is the sustainer. As we know that Allah is the provider of rizq, so the provisions are the responsibilities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are supposed to do some work, and in reward Allah will provide us. So all the provisions to the human, to the birds, to every living thing, all the risk is provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the idea of Allah is sustainer. And for this there are many verses, there are many hadiths, and that we will discuss in the lecture covering this topic. And then God is real owner of everything and man is merely a trustee. And we believe that Allah is the owner of everything. Everything belongs to Allah, and we are simply a trustee. We are not the real owner. Real owner is Allah. We come into this universe, we inherit a property, or maybe we earn a property that we think this is my property or this is our property, but the owner of all these things is Allah, and by the time we live, we are a trustee here. And all this wealth, all this property will remain here, and the people, they will die. And everything created for service and use of man. And whatever has been created in this universe, this is for the use of man, and we have to find the ways how to utilize them all. And at this age, in this age of technology, we have found out so many things that we can utilize the power of this universe. And we will have the hadith, we will have the Quranic verses regarding this topic as well. And then when everything has been created for man, for the humankind, then there is concept of halal and haram. It means that everything is created for the humankind, but we are confined, we have limits. We can't go beyond those limits. We can't use everything. For example, we are not allowed to eat pork, we are not allowed to use alcoholic drinks, we are not allowed to involve into different kind of activities which are haram in Islam, and all these things are mentioned in Quran and Hadith. And then there is concept of sadaqat and zakat. Everything is created for man, for the use of man. Then there is a limitation that these things can be used, these things cannot be used. And then there is concept of sadaqat and zakat. The idea is that there are people who will not have any wealth. So it has been mentioned in Quran that in the wealth of people there is a share of those who don't have. So for the needy and the people who are deprived of wealth, their share is in the wealth of the people who have that wealth. And there is prohibition of interest. As I mentioned, that there is concept of halal and haram. Whatever we eat, whatever we do, whatever we transact. In our financial transaction also, we are supposed to take care of certain things. So riba is one of them. So riba has been mentioned in Quran, and the meaning of riba is that any addition in the principal amount over a time period will constitute riba. If you want to exchange things of same specifications, things of same nature, you can only exchange them with the same quality and quantity. For example, if you want to exchange rice of a lower quality over a time period with the rice of a higher quality, so this is not allowed. If you want to exchange the things, you have to exchange the things with the same denomination. But if you want to exchange different kinds of things, for example rice with wheat, so you can price them and you can exchange them according to the price. But the exchanging of money for money with any addition into it over a time period, that is the meaning of riba, and this is interest which is being practiced into our economy, and this is forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, and this is declared as an act of war. And there is ban on hoarding. It means whatever wealth we have, we should not hoard it. There has been punishment announced for the people who hoard. So whatever wealth we have, whatever gold, silver or any kind of wealth we have, we should not hoard it, and if we want to hoard it, we actually have to pay zakat on it, and when we pay zakat on it, it will be depleted by 2.5% every year. So this is a kind of mechanism to bring the wealth back into the economy. So when the wealth circulates into the economy, it will make the economy healthier and wealthier. And then there is policy of moderation, that we are the ummah we are a moderate ummah. So in all our actions, policy of moderation must be there. So when we are talking of financial system, one of Prophet ﷺ's hadith suggests that moderation in expenditure is half of livelihood. So this is a golden principle, that if we don't want to extend our hands for our needs, we should be careful while we are spending. We should not spend beyond our limits. We should be moderate. Whatever we have, we should spend accordingly. And then condemnation of monasticism and materialism. Monasticism, you may call it as rahbaniyat, that is to disconnect from the worldly life and from the society, and to stay alone or live separate and to worship Allah. But in Islam, all of our actions, they are a worship if we perform them according to the guidance of Quran and Hadith. So if we take care of all these instructions, every action of our daily routine is an ibadah. And also we should avoid materialism. Where there is materialism, the social bond, the family relationships, they diminish there. For example, we have the example of the advanced economies, the developed countries. The social bond is very weak. The relationship of the family and the society is very weak. The state and the institutions, they are supposed to be responsible for all the individuals, but the individuals, they don't want to take care of themselves or each other. And this is not the principle for all, but this can be seen, this can be observed in the developed countries. And then equity, not equality. Equity means justice, fairness. So we have to be in an Islamic system. People should be fair to each other. There should be justice for all. And not equality means the wealth may not be distributed evenly among all the members of the society. There might be some people who are wealthier. There might be some people who are poor. The idea is that the people with wealth, they can have the services of labor. If everyone has equal share in the wealth, then nobody would be available for different kind of services. No labor would be available. So in that case, the innovation in different productions could not take place. We need labor in so many transactions, and all those transactions were not possible if everybody has an equal share in the wealth. So not equality means that inequality is allowed as far as distribution of wealth is concerned, but in the society everyone is equal, and the most respectful among the public in Islam is the one who is more pious. So as you know that inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, the most respectful near Allah is the one who is more pious. So this is the first lecture, first topic that we will discuss in our coming lecture, and it is all based on Quranic verses and ahadith of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And again, I will remind you that in your exams, you are simply asked to go through all these things and learn all these things, but you will not be supposed to write these things in your exams, because you may write it not exactly, so this is not good. And based on all these characteristics, we derive certain principles in the Islamic financial system. So the first principle, that is money as potential capital. We consider money, these paper money, as a potential capital, but we don't consider it a capital, because in the conventional economic system, money is supposed to be a commodity. That commodity can earn something. When we deposit into conventional banks, we earn interest onto it. So that earning money out of money is not allowed, because money is a claim of debt. With these piece of papers, you cannot involve into production. You can't produce anything with these piece of paper. You have to convert these papers into something else. You can't eat these papers. Rather, you should purchase some vegetables, some food. Only then you can eat it. So in itself, money is not a commodity. Money is a medium of exchange. So it carries the potential of capital, but in itself it cannot be considered as capital, whereas in conventional economic system, money is one of the four factors of production, and it is under the factor of capital. And then prohibition of interest. Interest is not allowed, as we saw in the previous slide, that under Islamic economic system, interest is forbidden. So when interest is forbidden, it means all of our savings that go into deposits cannot earn any interest onto it. So then how to earn something? It means we should assume risk and we will invest. So under the Islamic financial system, interest is not the earning, rather profits are the returns and the losses are the risks. So when we say interest is 0%, it means we are assuming risk which is 100%. And then risk is shared among the people. We become partners into different kind of activities, and then we share the risk, and the reward of risk is profits or losses. And sanctity of contracts. When we trust each other in any contract, maybe a partnership contract or a sale contract, then we have to honor that. Islamically, we have to follow that, because Allah says in Quran, "Awfu bil ahdi, innal ahda kana mas'oola." We have to fulfill our promises, and verily we will be asked about our promises. So we have to be responsible when we make any promise. And Sharia approved activities, it is derived out of the concept of halal and haram. When we say something is haram, it means it is not allowed. So all those activities which are haram, which are not according to the Sharia, then we should avoid that, and we can only engage in halal activities. For example, no business under the Islamic financial system can involve into trade of alcoholic drinks, of narcotics, or any immoral businesses which are being practiced in the developed world, we say, like gambling, we have casinos, and then the businesses of prostitution and pornography, all these things which are not allowed in Islam. So they are against the Sharia rulings. So we should take care of that as well in the Islamic financial system. And then individual liberty. So no individual under the Islamic financial system has any kind of restriction. Whatever halal business you want to do, you are allowed to do that. And how much profit you want to earn, you are allowed to do that, provided that there is no concept of monopoly. You are not allowed to monopolize the economy, because whoever monopolizes the economy or the market, Prophet ﷺ has declared him or her as a sinner. So, and then the right to own property by earning out of halal sources, as much you want to earn, you are allowed to do that, provided that you don't earn from the haram sources, and also you pay zakat, which is due on it. And economic inequality and charity, what we know as equity and not equality, that equity will be there, but economically people can be unequal. There can be poor, there can be rich people in the economy. And the social equality is the concept where there is a fair justice for all. People will be treated as a human and they are all respected. And circulation of wealth, it will mean that hoarding is not allowed. When hoarding is not allowed, it means all the wealth will come into the market. And when it comes into the market, just like the blood in the system, in the body, when it moves properly, it means the body is healthier. And just in the same way, when the wealth is moving into the economy smoothly and more business activities are being conducted out of this wealth, so there is a value addition into the economy. So this is the main idea of circulation of wealth. And zakat is one of the tools that will make sure the people, they don't keep their wealth hoarded into their safe deposits. So they have to bring up their wealth into the market, into the economy, to be invested into some healthy economic activities. And the third topic that we will discuss is the existing economic systems, because the humankind, they have evolved certain systems just to live smoothly in an environment where everyone is free to adopt or to act whatever the way they want, and to engage in economic activities such that people, they can earn for themselves and they can live a healthy life. And there are different systems, they have been developed by the humankind without any divine guidance. The one we see where we are living now at the moment is the capitalism. And we are actually living under the capitalism. And in the capitalistic societies, we have so many bad points as well, and there are so many good points as well. The advantages and disadvantages are there. And the next system that was designed as a reaction, I would say, to the capitalism was socialism, because in capitalism, wealth was being accumulated in few hands. So the socialism suggests that wealth becomes the ownership of all the public. And in that system, the government would be owning the factors of production and people would be working as workers. So in this case, whoever works hard will get a little more and whoever is working less will be earning less. But then came the concept of communism. It means all the assets, all the wealth of the nation belongs to the nation. It's a public wealth, and all the people in that nation, they have to work and they will be rewarded with the food, shelter and security and their medical treatment. And nobody will be earning more than the others, and religion would be banned into it. So these are different features of all these systems. And some of the systems, they have completely failed. We see around us, we have seen the fall of Soviet Russia, and communism has completely failed into it. And capitalism has partially failed. We saw different crises, particularly in 2007 and 8. There was an economic crisis, and that was all because of the capitalistic system. And then we have a divine guidance to design an economic system, which is the Islamic economic system. So being Muslim, we strongly believe that this is a system which can eradicate all the ills from the economy, which can help the poor, which can provide the potential to the individuals such that they don't extend their hands for their needs to others. And then in fourth topic, we may try to make a comparison between the economic systems. So first of all, we try to make a comparison between the socialism and communism. And they are supposed to be the same system, but there are slight differences. For example, in socialism, people, they can earn a reward a little more if they work more. And the people who earn lesser, they have a lesser reward. And also, religion is allowed in socialism, but religion is banned in communism. And there are so many similarities in other aspects, like the factors of production, they are owned by the government. What to produce, how to produce, the production, distribution, all these systems, they are decided by the government. And a comparison of a major economic systems in the world, that is capitalism, socialism, communism and Islamic economic system, we will do that in this lecture as well. And then comes the concept of money in Islamic economic system or Islamic financial system. So in this lecture, we will watch an animated documentary. It's about 40 minutes or 45 minutes. The topic of this documentary is money as debt. And in this lecture, we will see how the money evolved into the economies, how it started all, and what was the role of the goldsmith, and how initially the gold coins and silver coins, they were designed, and later on we shifted to the paper money, and that paper money was backed by assets, and gradually all the standards of asset-backed currencies, they were abandoned. And nowadays the government, they are simply printing the money, and that is creating so many problems into the economy. One of them is the inflation. And the role of money in the economy and its usage as a tool to create debt, this will be very much clear to you when you watch that documentary, and I leave it till that lecture. And the implications of fiat money, the money we see, the paper money, which is a document representing a claim, and it is authorized by the governments. So this paper money is creating so many problems, like creation of debt, the credit creation against a deposit. There is a huge amount of credit that can be created, and inflation is the result, because this paper money can be printed by the governments, and also a deposit can be multiplied into multiple deposits. For example, a deposit of 100,000 can be multiplied to 4 times. This phenomena we will discuss in this lecture. And unjust wealth appropriation, the people who have more money, they can earn more money, because money is being treated as commodity. And under the capitalistic society where we are living, the wealthier have the chances to become more wealthier, and the poorer will becoming poorer and poorer. And the deposit multiplication is the concept that when there is a deposit of, suppose, 100,000, it will be multiplied many times depending upon the reserve requirement. Suppose if the reserve requirement is 10%, and this example we have discussed in the forthcoming lectures as well. If the required reserve requirement is 10%, bank will keep 10%, if that is 10,000 of it, and 90,000 will be forwarded as loan, and that 90,000 will go again into some bank. The person who borrows that money will deposit the money into maybe the same bank or into any other bank, and out of it again 10% will be kept by the bank, and remaining will be borrowed again, and this process will continue until it is multiplied. So these are the deposits, which are the credits which have been created against an initial deposit of 100,000, and if this process continues, assuming that all the money borrowed comes back into the banks, so it will reach to an amount of 900,000. And a deposit of 100,000 will be converted into 900,000. So this is the concept of deposit multiplication. And when the reserve requirement is increased, accordingly this deposit will decrease. So this increase in deposit actually is increasing the potential of the customers to purchase the things. So then the potential of the buyers, there will be more buyers, there will be more demand in the market, and it will lead towards inflation. And the sixth topic would be factors of production in Islamic economic system. And to understand the concept of factors of production in Islamic economic system, in that lecture we will discuss the conventional factors of production, that is known as land, labor, capital, and the entrepreneur or the organization. And each of these factors of production, they have their reward. For example, land has a reward of rent, labor has a reward as wage, capital has a reward as interest, and entrepreneur or the organization has their reward as profit or losses. So out of these 4 factors, only this factor is considered to be assuming risk. Other factors, they are supposed to offer services. So against those services, they are compensated differently. So land will be compensated with rent, labor with wages, and capital will be compensated with interest. So that interest is earned over a balance which is known as money. So the monetary resources under the conventional economic system, they have their reward as interest. And there is a confusion as well, that in capital we not only have the money, but we have some equipment, some plants. So all these things, they have their reward as interest. So this has not been explained in the conventional economic system. And then under the Islamic economic system, concept of factors of production is different. We have consumed inputs and we have factor inputs. So in the factor inputs, all those inputs which are not consumed, they are part of factor inputs. And in the consumed inputs, we have raw materials, we have the maybe fuel as well, we have the monetary resources. They are also consumed. We cannot use that monetary resources, the piece of paper, to convert them into a finished product through a certain process. We have to convert them into the consumed inputs or into the factor inputs. So this concept will be elaborated in this lecture. And then the role of money as of being a factor of production, that what will be the role of money under the Islamic economic system. So as I mentioned earlier, under the Islamic economic system, the factors of production, they are divided into two, that is factor inputs and consumed inputs. So these inputs, they are not consumed into the production process. These factor inputs, they provide a service. So for their services, they are compensated. And then the consumed inputs, they are consumed into the process. Either they evaporate in the process or they are converted into some different shape. For example, if the raw material is kind of plastic, it will be converted into some shapes, into different kind of goods. It may be a glass in raw material, it may be an iron, things like that. So any raw material which is converted into different shape, that is also a consumed input. And money, it will not be used as it is. It has to be consumed. So then it should be treated differently. It should not be treated as capital. As in our previous topics also, we have discussed money as potential capital. It has the potential to be converted into capital, but in itself, it is not a commodity. It's not a capital. And money will be recognized as consumed input, and it will not have a reward as interest. Rather, it will be converted into either consumed input or into factor input. Only then it will be eligible to earn some reward into it. And then money and Islamic viewpoint. Here we will compare it with the conventional point of view and with the Islamic point of view. So the concept and nature of money in the conventional system is that money is a commodity and can be used to obtain other goods. So how the money evolved and all these things we will discuss into this lecture. And widely marketable as it is highly in demand and valued good. So money can be marketed, particularly those currencies which are in demand. For example, almost more than 60% of the world trade is taking place in dollar. So dollar is being demanded all over the world. The dollar's demand is never decreasing. And it can be transported easily. And if there is no money, we have to work the barter system. You carry your valuable goods and you exchange them with the valuable goods. But with the provision of money, you have the option to carry only these paper notes and without weight, and you can easily carry them with you, and you can simply exchange them for some other valuable goods. And it is easy to transfer. Then relatively scarce, as it is high in demand and high in value. So it has demand all over the world, and it has, according to the demand, it will be valued under the conventional system. Then money is relatively imperishable. If you want to exchange through the barter system and you carry your valuables, if you are carrying a perishable good, even before exchanging with some other good but you want to purchase, your goods might be perished. For example, if you have some vegetables and you want to exchange them with wheat or rice, so if you are unable to exchange them within 2, 3 or 4 days, then your goods will be perished. So, but the money doesn't perish, and it's durable and can be used for future purchases, and easy to store, and you can keep it with you for your future obligations, and easily divisible. It can be easily divided into smaller units. You might have a note of 5,000 rupees. You can divide it into 5 notes. Then accordingly, you can divide it till rupee 1 as per your requirement. And money lasts forever. It is supposed that the note, what you have, that paper note, it lasts forever. If it is unusable, maybe the state bank or the central bank will issue you another note for that. All units of money, they are similar to each other, and it will make it easier to calculate them and to estimate and estimate the value of the money and to distinguish from each other. Whereas the concept of money under Islamic economic system is that Islam treats money as unit of account to determine the relative worth of goods and service. So in this topic we will study that the distinction between the money concept in conventional system and in Islamic system and how they are treated differently. So money is considered to be a unit of account, to restore a value. It's a medium of exchange. So then the understanding of money in Islamic economic system is totally different than that of conventional economic system. As far as exchanging these currency notes with some valuable goods, it is same thing, but taking the money as a commodity is not allowed in the Islamic economic system. So these are few points that Islam treats money as a unit of account to determine the relative worth of goods. For example, if you want to exchange a pen with some book, both have different values. If there is no common standard, then you are unable to exchange your pen with the book. Maybe the person having a book want to purchase a pen and you want to purchase a book, but because of absence of unit of account, you may not be able to exchange it. So money provides you a unit of account that your bank may be valued at 100 rupees and the book may be valued at 150 rupees, so you can exchange them by paying the difference. And a medium of exchange and not a store of value. So in itself is not a store of value. But if the goods, the currency is in the form of gold or silver, which was practiced in the Islamic history, then that is a store of value as well. And all units of money of the same denomination are 100% equal to each other, and it becomes useful only when it is exchanged into real assets or used to buy services. So these paper notes, in itself they are not useful, but they can be exchanged with something useful, maybe with the goods or with the services. And money cannot be sold or bought on credit. So the exchange of money with some decrease or increase into it is not possible. You can't sell your 100 rupees for 110 rupees. This will constitute riba. And then the eighth topic would be the principles of Islamic banking. In this lecture we will see the governing principles of Islamic banking system and what are the differences between Islamic and conventional banking system. So let me read out for you a few of the governing principles. First of all, interest is prohibited. As the literature suggests, the Quran and Hadith orders us that interest is not allowed in any business or financial transaction. So the banking practices of Islamic institutions, they will not cater interest into their practices. And avoidance of speculation, that is avoidance of uncertainty, it is not allowed in Islamic economic system. It means that all the derivative market, it is being operated on speculation. In our secondary markets where we deal in securities or shares or stocks, the dealing in stocks is allowed because it represents an ownership into any firm. But dealing in other derivative instruments like debt instruments like bonds, it is not allowed. These are the speculative instruments, and the investors, they invest on the basis that the prices might rise, and whereas these are the debt instruments. They don't have any obligation with the underlying asset onto them. So trading of debt is not allowed. And avoidance of oppression, exploitation of the poor by the rich, of the labor by the employee, these exploitation because of the positions of the people, it is again not allowed. And introduction of Islamic tax. Islamic banks, they charge tax, they deduct zakat from their deposits. Although these services are being provided by the conventional banks as well, but you will see that when there is the time to deduct zakat, people, they withdraw their balances from their accounts, and they don't want the conventional banks to withdraw zakat because that zakat will go to the government system, and people, they think that their zakat may not reach to the people deserve. So they prefer to pay zakat by themselves. Whereas Islamic banks, they also provide the same service, but they are trusted, I think, better than the conventional banks. And the financing of Sharia approved activities, only those financings are possible where the underlying business is Sharia compliant. Whereas conventional banks, they don't take care about these things. So these are a few of the differences. And also we will make a tabular comparison between the Islamic banks and the conventional banks in this topic. And then we will come towards the modes of financing in Islam, that the Islamic financial institutions, what kind of modes or what kind of transactions they finance. So first of all, we will discuss the sale mode of financing, that is known as Murabaha. These are few terminologies you will become familiar after few lectures. Murabaha means it's the sale of an asset with profit into it. In a sale transaction, the seller charges a profit. This is natural. But here, the Islamic banks, they become sellers and the client becomes purchaser. And the client approaches the bank to purchase a particular asset, and the Islamic bank will purchase the asset and will add profit into it, and then will charge the price to the client. The asset will be transferred to the client, and the client will make the payment maybe in installments or on lump sum basis after a time period, and it can be on the cash basis as well. But in this transaction, Islamic bank will disclose all the cost plus the portion of profit into it. And if the profit and different costs, they are not disclosed, then this transaction will be known as Musawama, but we will not be discussing that in today's course. And there are different stages involved in Murabaha transaction. We will study the three different models. First model will say that client will purchase the asset from the bank. Bank will be the owner of the asset, and there will be a sale transaction. But the other model is that client will ask the bank to purchase an asset, and asset will be purchased from a vendor, and then it will be delivered to the client. And the third model is said that, and the third model says that the Islamic bank will be approached by the client, and Islamic bank will nominate the client as an agent, and as an agent, the client will purchase the asset from the vendor, and the bank will make the payment to the vendor, and then there will be a sale contract between the bank and the client. So these are different arrangements of Murabaha. And one thing should be kept in mind, that asset should be a new asset in the case of Murabaha. And another sale mode of financing is Salam and Istisna. Salam is a sale transaction where the bank makes the payment at the spot and the client will deliver the asset in the future. And this transaction or this mode of financing is particularly designed for the farmers in agriculture sector, such that the farmers, they will sell their crop which has not yet been grown, and they will receive the price in advance. So the Islamic bank at the time of contract will make payment full, and according to the nature of the crop, it will be grown by the farmer and it will be delivered according to the date specified into the contract. A date will be fixed. And then Islamic bank will enter into an advance contract if the contract is signed with the third party even before the receiving the commodities in the first contract, then that will be known as a parallel salam contract, and details we will discuss in the lecture. And then there is a concept of istisna. I think this is the word which we can write it like that. This word has been derived from the word what we are familiar with, sanat, like to manufacture something. So in this case, the goods are sold even before they come into existence, and just like salam. But in case of istisna, the subject matter of the contract, which are the commodities, they need manufacturing. It may be a furniture, it may be a bridge, it may be a house, it may be the mobile phones, it may be anything that requires manufacturing. So that subject matter, there will be a contract between the client and the bank. The client will approach the bank for the manufacturing of that commodities or the goods. And bank, being a financial institution, cannot manufacture those goods, but will make an agreement with the client to get that goods according to the specified specifications into the contract. And then bank being a financial institution, not the manufacturer, will enter into a contract with the manufacturer, and that second contract will be known as parallel istisna. So both of these contracts, they have their details, and we will discuss them into the lecture when we come to that lecture. And also we will make a comparison between the salam and istisna modes of financing. And the next mode is the participatory mode of financing, where the bank becomes partner with the client. This is musharka. This is the shirka. The source word is shirka, to become partner. When we use the word shariq for Allah, it means to associate any partner with Allah, and Allah doesn't allow that. So Allah is one and doesn't allow any shariq with him. So it means no partner is with Allah. So here, for us in the financial institutions, musharka means a kind of partnership between the partners, where different partners, they bring their capital and they start a business venture. Now that venture can be of two types. One is shirkatul aqd, that is a commercial partnership, what we know as joint venture. That is for a particular venture. It may be for a particular time period or for the particular project. And then shirkatul milk, a joint ownership, where the partners, they contribute capital to purchase an asset with the hope that asset's price will increase, or with the hope that the asset will be leased out and the incomes will be derived out of it. So the treatment of these two is different, and we will discuss them into the lecture. And the shirkatul aqd refers to partnership with commercial objectives, whereas shirkatul milk refers to joint ownership in a particular asset. And then there is mudarba. Again, this is kind of partnership, and here the treatment of the partnership or the capital contribution will be different. The difference between musharka and mudarba is that in musharka, all the partners, they bring capital, but in mudarba, one partner will provide capital, the other partner will become manager and will be known as mudarib, and the capital provider will be known as rabbul mal. Now both in musharka and mudarba, profit sharing ratio can be any ratio, irrespective of their capital contribution. Suppose in musharka, the capital was 50% from both the partners, but the profit sharing ratio can be different than that. And likewise in mudarba, where the capital contributed by one partner is 0%, the other partner contributes 100%, but the profit sharing ratio can be 50% each. So this is possible. And then the loss is treated differently. The losses will be contributed according to the capital contribution. So if the capital contribution is 50% each, profit sharing ratio may be different, but capital loss will be shared 50% each. And in case of mudarba, the capital provider has provided 100% capital, so the 100% loss will be the responsibility of the capital provider. But there are certain exceptions, that if the manager has a willful mistake, that is, there was a negligence, there was a misconduct, there was a breach of contract by the manager, in that case losses will be recovered from the manager. And the further details we will discuss into the respective lectures. And then the concept of diminishing musharka, it is same as that of musharka. It's kind of regular partnership contract, but with the further provision that one of the partners will purchase the share of the other partner gradually. So the share of the other partner, which is normally an Islamic financial institution, is divided into units. So those units are purchased by the client, and the share of client in the ownership gradually starts increasing. So if they are owner of a business, accordingly the returns will be divided according to the ownership proportions. And then if they are owners into an asset, accordingly their returns will be justified. And the application of diminishing musharka in the purchase of house, there can be different applications, but it is particularly used in the house financing to purchase a house and maybe to construct a house or to renovate a house, and there is a balance transfer facility. A balance transfer facility means that if a client has got financing from a conventional institution and is paying interest on the balance, which is not allowed in Sharia, and to provide an opportunity to such client, Islamic banks, they will pay the remaining balance to the conventional bank, and with that payment they will become contributor into that venture, and their share will be according to their contribution, and what payments has been made by the client to the bank, that will be the share of the client into that asset. And then there is Ijara mode of financing. Ijara is simply a lease contract. So a lease contract may be for the asset and it may be for the services. If you are providing the services of a laborer, a tailor, an engineer, or doctor, this is also an Ijara contract. For the services, we charge a price. We receive a compensation, a reward. So that is also an Ijara contract. But if it is for an asset, when we use an asset on Ijara basis, that is on lease basis, you might rent a house and you use that house. And for that usage, you pay a price, that is the rent. And you may rent a car, and for that use of car, you pay a price, that is rent for that car. So the beneficial use of asset must be there. If there is no beneficial use of asset, it cannot be leased. And the details we will study in the lecture. Then there are applications of Islamic financing, particularly in the project financing, working capital financing, import and export financing. And the modes of Musharka, Mudarba and Murabha can be applied in all these types. And the details, inshallah, we will be discussing in the respective lecture. And these are very simple and easy to understand concept. So don't get confused that lectures are going to be, lectures are covering so many topics. So these are very, very simple topics, and you will be easily understanding all these topics. And also the Islamic investment funds. Islamic investment funds, mostly the Islamic banks and conventional banks, they manage funds. They announce funds, they issue a prospectus that we are going to arrange such and such fund. So with that fund, people will deposit their savings into that fund, and they will get a certificates representing their share into that fund. So then with that fund, with that pool of fund which is created by different depositors, the managers are normally the banks. If it is an Islamic bank, that pool of fund will be used according to these different instructions. For example, if it is an equity fund, that pool of fund will be used to invest into stocks. And if it is an Ijara fund, an asset will be purchased and it will be leased to the lessee, to the user. And the rents will be received, that will be the income of the depositors or the subscribers into that fund. And in case of equity fund, the dividend income and the price appreciation in the share price will be the income of the subscribers. And then commodity funds, when the fund is used to trade in commodities, that will be a commodity fund. And in case of Murabha fund, an asset will be purchased and it will be sold to the client, and the payments will be received later on. And then there is Bay ad-Dain, which we know as sale of debt. In all these funds, the subscribers, they carry a certificate which represents their ownership into that fund. So in this fund, if it is in the equity funds, it represents an ownership into some tangible assets, because the shares, they are the representative of ownership into the assets of the company. And then in case of Ijara fund, an asset is purchased and it is leased to the client. So in that case, these certificates represent an ownership into that asset. It is a tangible asset. And then if it is a commodity fund, the commodities will be purchased and sold. And in case of Murabha funds, commodities will be purchased and sold. Now it represents an ownership into a claim of debt, right? So there are tangible assets, there are non-tangible assets. Non-tangible means a claim of debt. So accordingly, these certificates can be sold and cannot be sold in the secondary market. If the certificates, they represent more than 50% ownership in the tangible asset, then these certificates can be traded or negotiated in the secondary market. Otherwise, they cannot be sold in the secondary market. And the mixed fund means when the fund is announced, not specifically for ijara or equity or commodity or murabha, a mixture of all will be operated with this mixed fund. In that case, this is known as a mixed fund. So this is the concept of Islamic investment fund. So we will discuss them in detail when this topic will come. And in 17th topic, which is sukuk, a very simple concept but has lot of controversies into it. It is a substitute of bond. We know that bond is a debt instrument. It has interest onto it. Whenever the subscribers of bonds, they invest into bonds, they pay a price to purchase the bond against an interest payment. So interest is paid semi-annually or annually, whatever the mode is there. Whereas the sukuks, they are also a mechanism to raise funds. Funds are raised, finances are arranged, and with these finances, a business activity is conducted. So the objective of sukuk is the underlying asset, whereas the objective of bond is to raise finances, but the subscribers of bonds, they don't have any information where those bonds are invested, where those funds are invested, and what is the usage of those funds. They are simply concerned with the amount invested, the face value of the bond, the coupon rate onto it. So these things are the main concern. Whereas in sukuk, the main idea is the underlying business transaction. So the sukuks can be of different nature, that is the mudarba sukuk, musharaka sukuk, and all these things. And there are certain controversies or objections into sukuks because practically when we see the treatment of sukuk, there is not much difference between the bond treatment and a sukuk treatment. And these controversies we will discuss in detail when this topic comes. And then the risk underlying Islamic financial modes. So we will discuss different Islamic financial modes like murabha, salam, istisna, ijara, mudaraba, musharaka. All these modes, they have their risk with it. So the risk in Islamic financial system is unique as compared to the conventional financial system. Because in conventional financial system, there is only a credit risk, because the client is under any transaction, client is borrowed a fund, and the conventional banks, they are supposed to recover that fund, the principal amount plus interest onto it. Whereas in case of Islamic banks, they enter into a partnership with the client, and the underlying objective is some asset, some commodity. Now the risk of the nature of risk is different in the beginning, during the transaction period, and at the end. So it may be a credit risk, it may be a market risk, it may be a counterparty risk. The details we will be discussing when the topic comes. And then after discussing the risk in the financial instruments, then we come towards the takaful concept, which is an insurance arrangement under the Islamic principles. So we have the conventional insurance system, we have an Islamic insurance system. In the conventional insurance system, there are certain things which are not allowed under the Islamic economic system. So those things, they are managed and they are taken care to make the system according to the Islamic instructions, and then we call it takaful. The idea behind insurance is to transfer the risk of the policyholders or the participants to the insurance company. Whereas in case of takaful, the word is derived from the word kafala, which means guaranteeing each other, and then the people, they contribute their funds and they create a pool of fund, and there is a entity or a body which is operating these funds. It is known as takaful operator. So the takaful operator or the Islamic insurance operator, they manage these funds, and all the participants, they contribute into that fund, and if some loss or damage or accident occurs, so out of this fund, the participants, they are compensated. So then there are different models, and there are differences between the takaful and insurance companies. The main difference is that in insurance, the risk is transferred to the insurance company, whereas in takaful, these arrangements make sure that risk is shared by all. So this is a virtuous act. All the contributions, they go into a work fund. So out of that work fund, which is a charity fund, which is, you may call it a sadaqah fund, so that fund is used to compensate the losses. So we will also discuss some differences between Takaful and conventional insurance system. And then there are different models of Takaful. What we know as the Wakala model, Mudarba model, and the hybrid of these two models, that is Wakala and Mudarba. So Wakala model suggests that the Takaful operator, when they announce any Takaful options to the participants, people will subscribe into that and they will create a pool of fund, and that fund will be used to deduct the administrative cost. So they charge a fee for their services. So that is known as Wakala fee. Because the Takaful operators, they are the wakils or agent. So as an agent, they charge a fee. Maybe you can call it as agency cost. So that is the income of the Takaful operator. That is the Wakala fee. So, and that fund will be managed by them, and they will use that fund to invest into different activities, and they will derive benefits. Those benefits will again become part of that fund, and out of that fund, all the the claims will be compensated, all the expenses relating to the Takaful management, that will be deducted out of it, and a reserve will be maintained. If the reserve, if there is something more than reserve, then that extra money can be gifted back to the participants, or it can be used for different charitable purposes, maybe to help the victims of disasters, like we have the victims of tsunami victims, the earthquake victims. So there are different victims in the economy or the society. So for that purpose, we can use these funds, and it depends upon the agreement between the participants and the Takaful company. And then in case of Mudarba model, the Takaful operators, they don't charge a fee, but they invest the fund of the participants' contribution, and they earn profits with it. And the profits are shared between the Takaful operator and that fund. So whatever is the profit of fund, that goes back into the fund, and from that fund, losses will be compensated in the form of claims, and there will be some Takaful arrangements, that is reinsurance arrangements, and then there will be a balance maintained. We may call it a reserve account, and if something is more than the reserve, again it will be treated same as in the case of Wakala model. And in case of a hybrid model, the Takaful operators, they will charge a fee, and then they will manage the funds, and they will invest the funds into different activities, and they will derive profits. Those profits will also be distributed between the Takaful operator and that fund. So here in the hybrid model, the Takaful operators, they will charge a fee, plus they become partner on the basis of Mudarba. And finally, we will discuss the concept of evolution of Islamic banking in Pakistan. And in Pakistan, we will discuss the social and political background of Pakistan, and we will see the distribution of wealth in Pakistan, and how few of the families, they are controlling most of the resources of this country. And as you may know that we inherited the system from the colonial power, the British power. The British, they were ruling in this region, in the south, in the subcontinent, and we inherited almost all the institutional arrangements what we have today. The banking system we inherited, it was the conventional banking system. The economic system that we inherited, it was the capitalistic system, and all these things, they don't match with the Sharia requirements. There is concept of halal and haram in the Islamic financial system, but that has not been taken care in the conventional system, because even today, after about 67, 68 years of its creation, in Pakistan, we still have that interest-based system, and which is completely against the instructions, the divine instructions of Quran and Hadith. So we need to replace them. And also this particular system, which is capitalistic system, it has its characteristics that wealth accumulates in few hands. And if you look at the wealth distribution in the world, 99.9% of the people on this globe, they have only 19.9% or maybe less than 20% of this total wealth. And only 0.1% of the population of this world, they have their ownership of wealth more than 80%. So you can see under the capitalistic system how the wealth accumulates in few hands. Only 0.1% people, they have the wealth more than 80% of this word. And then we will discuss the history of Islamic banking in Pakistan, that how the Islamic banking system it evolved, and we will have a look into the history of Islamic banking system in Pakistan to see that how it evolved and how when the processes they started, starting from the 70s until today, a very slow process, all depending on the reluctance and all depending upon the half-hearted efforts by the government to convert the system into the Islamic financial system. And also there was a reluctance by the businesses, by the banks and the government also. And it was very slow process, and even today the share of Islamic banking industry in the total banking operations is about 10%. So after so many years, about 40 years, we still have only a share of 10%. Whereas if we look at the other parts of the world, in Malaysia now the Islamic banking industry has a share more than 20%. And the efforts, they also almost started at the same time. So although it's a slow process, it's a gradual process, but the movement towards Islamization of the economy is very slow in Pakistan. And then there is a perception also, the Islamic banks, they have not created an attractive perception in the minds of the users or the clients. There is a huge perception among the public that Islamic banks, they are almost the same thing as that of conventional banks, and they are only changing the terminologies. Now it's your responsibility, this is my responsibility, how to correct this perception. In this lecture, I will try to highlight all those issues, all those controversies which have been raised by the public, which have been raised by the scholars. And when we come into practice, when we come into this field, we will try to rectify all these problems. And whenever we find any chance, any opportunity, we will highlight those controversies, that these controversies should be rectified to correct the perception of Islamic banking system in Pakistan. And also we will discuss some facts and figures regarding Islamic banking in Pakistan and the sources of information are the Islamic banks and the websites of State Bank. And there are so many sources available on the net. And there are few books that the list you will be getting soon. The list of available resources and the books you will have in your handbooks and the material that will be handed out to you. And finally, in this lecture, we tried to summarize the introduction of the whole course, and this about 20 topics, in which few of the topics they are very small and few of the topics which are little complex, and we have tried to distribute them over 2 or 3 lectures as well sometimes, so according to the importance of the topics. So in the 27th lecture we will cover all these topics, and after that 28, 9, 30, 31 and 32, in those 5 lectures we will revise all these courses. And inshallah see you in the next lecture. Till then, Assalamu alaikum.